Welcome to Sign Facts, where every movie hides a secret. Every scene tells a deeper story. And every frame contains details most viewers never notice, from legendary blockbusters and mind-bending science fiction to dark thrillers, unforgettable horror, and hidden cinematic gems. We explore the facts, theories, Easter eggs, behind-the-scenes secrets, and untold stories that make movies truly unforgettable. This isn't just watching movies, this is discovering what lies beneath them. Subscribe to Sign Facts, and step beyond the screen. Rizzo grows into the most talented warrior the clan has ever produced, but his rise comes at a steep cost. During a sparring match against the senior ninja Takeshi, Rizzo loses because his opponent cheats. Rather than condemning the foul play, Lord Azunu punishes Rizzo instead, calling him weak and subjecting him to a brutal torture technique that leaves him crumpled in agony. His final test is simply surviving the night alone, with no help. When Azunu finds him still standing at dawn, ready to keep training, the master finally acknowledges his strength. Rizzo goes on to surpass every other student, defeating opponents even while blindfolded and restrained. Kiriko is proud of him, but her doubts about the clan keep growing. She starts breaking the clan's strict rules more and more, and Rizzo warns her that Azunu will kill her if he finds out. Kiriko tells him her heart already belongs to him and can't be taken from her. During a training exercise, Kiriko is ordered to stab a fellow trainee. She can't bring herself to do it and hesitates. Furious, Lord Azunu slashes her face and throws her in a cage as punishment, a moment that changes everything. Rizzo starts sneaking out at night to see her, passing water through the bars. Days later, during a storm, Kiriko manages to climb the outer wall and begs Rizzo to run away with her. Torn between fear and loyalty, he refuses. The clan is the only life he's ever known, and he can't bring himself to leave it. Kiriko's escape fails. She's caught and brought before the clan for punishment, and in a cold, merciless scene, Takeshi drives a blade through her heart in front of everyone. Rizzo stays standing, but something in him is broken for good. Despite his grief, he remains with the clan, burying the pain deep inside. The story then jumps forward several years to Berlin. Inside Europol headquarters, a determined forensic analyst named Mika notices troubling financial patterns that point to a hidden organization. Not realizing how dangerous this knowledge is, she brings her findings to her boss, Maslow. He brushes it off at first, unwilling to believe an elite group of assassins could be operating outside any kind of oversight. But Mika shows him evidence connecting secret payments from world leaders to the sudden deaths of prominent people, and despite himself, he's intrigued enough to dig further. Their investigation leads them to records left behind by a former high-ranking KGB agent named Sabaton. Years earlier, he'd uncovered similar information, but once his claims started drawing attention, he was branded unstable, stripped of his position, and eventually murdered. Meanwhile, Rizzo is also living in Berlin, hiding out in a rundown apartment while carrying out a covert mission. Every morning he continues his brutal training, balancing on a block of nails just as he was taught. At a neighborhood laundromat, he meets a seemingly friendly woman and instantly senses something's off. She's a ninja assassin. Without warning, the two erupt into a vicious fight. Moments later, blood seeps from a washing machine, her lifeless body spinning silently inside. Mika keeps digging and goes to meet Sabaton's widow. The woman recalls how fearless her husband once was, and how paranoia consumed him after his disgrace. He locked down their home, kept every corner lit, and got rid of shadows wherever he could, convinced that darkness was where ninjas thrived. Despite his precautions, the power went out one night, and he was killed. Back at the office, a senior official shows up to review Mika's work, clearly keeping an eye on her, since rumors have spread that her curiosity is crossing dangerous lines. That night, Mika comes home to find her whole building without power. She cautiously steps into her pitch-black apartment and is ambushed by a ninja. Just as she's about to be killed, Another assassin steps in and kills her attackers with brutal precision. It's Rizzo. A flashback shows Rizzo's first mission as a full assassin. He carries it out with unrestrained brutality, letting years of suppressed rage pour out. Afterward, he joins the clan on a rooftop, where Lord Azunu praises him and calls him forward. Instead of bowing, Rizzo attacks A using his Kyokutsu Shoji to slash Azunu's face and destroy one of his eyes. The other ninjas retaliate savagely, beat him, and throw him off the building. He survives only because he lands in the water below. Since recovering, Rizzo has turned against the clan, sabotaging Azunu's assassination operations whenever he can. Saving Mika is just the latest instance. Knowing the ninjas can track by scent, he takes her to a hotel so they can change clothes. Mika calls Maslow and tells him she's with Rizzo. Maslow knows Rizzo isn't their real enemy, but he's been ordered to detain him, and his own life depends on following orders. When the three of them meet to plan their next move, police suddenly surround Rizzo and arrest him. He's taken to a secret facility and chained alone in a high-security cell. Mika soon realizes Maslow had him detained purely out of panic, and even though Maslow knows Rizzo isn't the real threat, he refuses to release him, convinced the prison is the safest place for him. That night, Mika secretly visits Rizzo's cell and brings him water. He quietly warns her the assassins are already close and will strike soon. She rushes to warn Maslow, but it's too late. The facility suddenly goes dark, and ninjas emerge from the shadows, moving faster than anyone can track. Even with cutting-edge weapons, the soldiers don't stand a chance. Just as Rizzo is about to be executed, Mika unlocks his chains. Freed, he tears through the attackers with lethal precision and urges her to escape, knowing he can't protect them both. Even as the clan's most elite warrior, taking on an entire squad alone pushes him to his limits. Eventually Rizzo and Takeshi face off on an open road. Takeshi raises his sword for the final blow, but at the last second Mika slams into him with her car. She rushes Rizzo to a nearby hotel. Badly wounded, he refuses medical treatment, and Mika stays by his side, talking softly to him as he drifts in and out of consciousness. She apologizes for not being able to help him more and thanks him for saving her life. Afterward, she quietly removes a tracking device and tells Maslow their location. Before the authorities arrive, the assassins strike again and take Rizzo without a trace. When police reach the hotel, they find only Mika alone. She tells them Rizzo was taken 10 minutes earlier. Back at the Azunu stronghold, Rizzo is brought before his old master, who offers him one last chance to beg forgiveness. Rizzo refuses without hesitation. Enraged, Azunu admits his fury comes from a sense of betrayal. He once believed Rizzo would succeed him as leader of the clan. Rizzo is forced into the same spot where Kiriko was executed, and Azunu unleashes his devastating finger strike technique 3 times. Most victims would die instantly, but Rizzo survives, vomiting up blood and, along with it, a hidden tracking device. Before the ninjas can react, Mika arrives with a full police assault team. Explosives rip through the compound, wiping out the clan's advantage in the dark, and a brutal battle breaks out on both sides. Rizzo faces Takeshi and his remaining warriors again, and though badly outnumbered, he kills them all before Takeshi arrives. Their final duel is savage and unrelenting, and Rizzo comes out on top, severing Takeshi's limbs and finishing him off for good. Only Lord Azunu is left. Rizzo finds his former master sitting calmly in a room, untouched by the chaos outside. Azunu shows off his mastery by vanishing and striking from behind, sending Rizzo crashing through walls. The two draw their blades and fight fiercely. Azunu offers forgiveness again, claiming to be Rizzo's real father. Rizzo rejects him, saying that killing Azunu will be his first true moment of freedom. As they charge at each other, Azunu disappears again. Mika enters the room to help, and Azunu reappears and stabs her through the chest. The fight tips in his favor until Rizzo copies his master's own technique, striking from the shadows and slashing him repeatedly. A final blow drives a blade into Azunu's shoulder, ending his reign. Rizzo carries Mika outside as paramedics arrive. It turns out that, like the old tattoo artist, Mika was born with her heart on the right side of her chest, which is what saves her life. In the final moments, Rizzo leaps over the academy wall, finally choosing freedom, just as Kiriko once wanted for him. Analysis: what if ninjas weren't just silent myths hiding in the shadows, but living weapons, trained in pain, raised without mercy, and unleashed with unstoppable rage? In 2009, Ninja Assassin burst onto screens and did something Hollywood rarely dares to do. It went all in. No restraint, no subtlety, just pure, stylized brutality wrapped in ancient ninja lore. From its opening minutes, the film makes one thing clear: this isn't a graceful martial arts fantasy, it's a blood-soaked revenge story. At a time when action movies were leaning toward realism and grounded heroes, Ninja Assassin went the opposite direction, embracing excess, faster fights, sharper blades, darker shadows, and violence so extreme it shocked critics and split audiences right down the middle. But here's the twist: years later, this movie didn't just fade away, it found a second life and a cult following, fans who love it not despite what it lacks, but because of how fearlessly it commits to its vision. This isn't a story about saving the world, it's about breaking free from control, turning against the system that made you, and figuring out what happens when a weapon decides to choose its own path. In this rundown, we're breaking down Ninja Assassin completely, its story, its themes, its hidden meanings, and why it remains one of the most divisive action films of its era. So if you're ready for shadows, steel, and a revenge tale soaked in rain and blood, let's get into it. Released in 2009, Ninja Assassin is a high-octane action thriller directed by James McTeigue, a filmmaker known for his visually aggressive, stylized approach to storytelling. Backed by the same producers behind The Matrix, the film was built to be bold, fast, and unapologetically intense. At the center of it all is Rain, making his Hollywood lead debut in a role that demands both physical brutality and emotional restraint. He's joined by Naomie Harris, whose character grounds the story in investigation and realism, offering a sharp contrast to the shadowy world of assassins and secret clans. The film moves across multiple international locations, from neon-lit cities to hidden training grounds, building a global atmosphere where danger always feels close by. Every setting reinforces the idea that this world operates beneath society's surface, unseen and unchecked. At its core, the premise is simple but powerful. A man raised as a weapon by a secret ninja organization breaks free and becomes their most dangerous enemy. There's no tangled political web here, no long stretches of exposition. The story is deliberately lean, built to support relentless action and visual storytelling. The focus isn't on who controls the world, it's on what happens when control slips away. If you're hoping for a slow burn or a character-driven drama, this isn't that movie. Instead, it's a stylized revenge thriller where speed, silence, and steel take center stage, and things only escalate from here. At its core, Ninja Assassin is a pure revenge-driven action film, though boxing it into one genre doesn't really do it justice. It sits at the crossroads of martial arts cinema, crime thriller, and dark fantasy, blending ancient ninja mythology with modern, hyper-stylized violence. The action isn't just fast, it's feral. Blades slice through the darkness, bodies vanish into shadow, and every fight feels less like choreography and more like an ambush. The violence is deliberately exaggerated, not for realism but to create a graphic, almost comic book intensity. The emotional tone is cold, brutal, and unforgiving. There's very little warmth here, and that's by design. In the world of Ninja Assassin, compassion gets punished and weakness gets exploited. Silence often speaks louder than dialogue, which only reinforces how isolated the main character really is. Thematically, the film revolves around control, identity, and rebellion. Rizzo isn't just fighting enemies, he's fighting the system that shaped him. Raised without choice, trained without mercy, and stripped of his individuality, His journey is about reclaiming his humanity from a life designed to erase it. This isn't a movie made for everyone. It's aimed squarely at viewers who enjoy stylized violence, intense martial arts action, and dark revenge narratives. If you're drawn to stories about lone warriors, secret societies, and breaking free from manipulation, this film speaks directly to that instinct. It doesn't ask you to reflect quietly, it challenges you to endure its world, feel its brutality, and decide for yourself whether freedom is worth the blood it costs. The story begins in the shadows, where childhood isn't protected, it's weaponized. Rizzo is taken in as a boy by the Azunyu clan, a secret ninja organization that doesn't raise children so much as break them. Orphans are shaped through pain, fear, and relentless discipline. Compassion is forbidden, and attachment is treated as weakness. Every lesson is carved into flesh and memory. Among the trainees is a young girl who dares to show kindness, something the clan sees as betrayal. When she's brutally executed as punishment, something inside Rizzo cracks. For the first time, obedience gives way to doubt, and in this world, doubt is a death sentence. Rizzo disappears, escaping the clan and becoming a ghost. Years later, the story shifts to the present, where a Europol researcher starts uncovering a disturbing pattern, a string of unexplained political assassinations, all pointing toward an unseen network of killers. Her investigation pulls her into a reality most people don't believe exists. Meanwhile, the Azunyu clan realizes Rizzo is still alive and worse, no longer under their control. What follows is a collision of past and present. The clan hunts Rizzo relentlessly, sending elite assassins after their greatest failure. But he's no longer the obedient child they trained. He's become something far more dangerous, a weapon that chose its own target. Each encounter raises the stakes further, and every fight is about more than survival. It's about severing ties to a past built on cruelty. As Rizzo closes in on the heart of the clan, the story shifts from escape to confrontation. This is no longer a chase, it's a war between creator and creation, and only one of them is walking away. The ending isn't just about spectacle, it's about finality. After surviving countless ambushes and dismantling the clan piece by piece, Rizzo finally reaches the confrontation he's been running towards since childhood, a final showdown with the master who made him. The battle is deeply personal. Every strike carries years of pain, obedience, and suppressed rage. When Rizzo finally defeats his former master, it marks more than the end of a villain. It represents the collapse of an entire ideology, one built on fear, control, and the belief that people can be molded into tools without consequence. Symbolically, Rizzo's victory isn't just about revenge. It's about choice. For the first time in his life, he's acting entirely on his own will and not following orders, not reacting to punishment. He's deciding who he is and who he refuses to be. The film doesn't tease a sequel or set up a larger universe. It ends on a note of hard-earned survival. Rizzo walks away not as a hero celebrated by the world, but as someone finally free of his past. The open question isn't whether other ninja clans still exist. They likely do. The real question is simpler and more powerful. Can a weapon, once broken and reforged, ever truly live as a human being? Ninja Assassin leaves that answer to the viewer, then fades back into the shadows where it began. At first glance, Ninja Assassin feels like pure adrenaline, but beneath the blades and blood, it's packed with visual symbolism that quietly deepens the story. Start with blood. Early on, it represents punishment and control, every drop tied to obedience and fear during Rizzo's training. But as the film goes on, blood takes on a different meaning. It becomes the price of freedom. By the final act, it no longer signals weakness, it marks rebellion. Then there's the rain itself. It's not just a stylistic flourish, it shows up during moments of transition, escapes, confrontations, and turning points. Symbolically, it acts as a cleanser, washing away the past, blurring identities, and letting Rizzo disappear from who he once was. The heavy use of shadow and silhouette is another detail many viewers overlook. The ninjas are rarely shown fully lit, reinforcing the idea that they exist somewhere between myth and reality, never fully human. never fully unseen. When Rizzo steps into the light during key moments, it subtly signals his break from that hidden world. The training scenes early on also double as foreshadowing and the punishments, the rules, the enforced isolation all predict the clan's eventual downfall. The system is too rigid and too cruel to be sustainable. Its collapse is baked into its foundation. Finally, the film sprinkles in visual callbacks to classic ninja cinema, traditional weapons, ritualistic training, ceremonial discipline, blending old-school mythology with modern action aesthetics. These details don't call attention to themselves, they sit quietly in the background, rewarding viewers who look past the surface. Once you notice them, Ninja Assassin feels less like mindless violence and more like a stylized story about breaking free from an identity forged in darkness. Behind all the blood and blades, the production was just as intense as the story on screen. Rain's transformation for the role was no illusion. He underwent months of brutal physical training, learning martial arts choreography, weapon handling, and high-impact stunt work. He reportedly dropped a significant amount of weight and performed many of his own stunts, something the film's fast, close-up combat constantly shows off. The movie was produced by the same creative minds behind The Matrix, and that influence is everywhere. The exaggerated physics, hyper-stylized action, and dramatic slow motion are all deliberate choices meant to make the fights feel larger than life rather than realistic. Here's a lesser-known fact. Ninja Assassin was originally even more violent. Early cuts pushed the limits so far that the film struggled with ratings boards, and several scenes were trimmed or altered to avoid an NC-17 rating, meaning what audiences saw in theaters was actually a toned-down version of the director's original vision. The heavy use of CGI blood wasn't just for spectacle. Either it also let filmmakers amplify the violence while keeping performers safer during complex fight choreography. It's one of the film's most controversial choices, but also one of its defining signatures. Despite its ambitious scale, the film faced marketing challenges and stiff competition at the box office. But behind the scenes, it stands as a rare example of a Hollywood action film that fully committed to ninja mythology without softening its edges for mass appeal. Love it or hate it, Ninja Assassin is the product of real dedication, bold creative risk-taking, and a production team willing to push boundaries even if it meant dividing audiences along the way. To really understand Ninja Assassin, it helps to see it alongside the films around it. At first it invites comparisons to martial arts heavyweights like The Raid or Ong Bak, but where those films lean on realism and grounded, physically demanding choreography, Ninja Assassin chooses stylization over authenticity. Its fights aren't meant to feel real, they're meant to feel mythic. Then there's Kill Bill, another blood-soaked revenge saga steeped in symbolism. Both films embrace exaggerated violence, but their approaches differ. Kill Bill leans into playful homage and genre blending, while Ninja Assassin stays grim, serious, and relentlessly dark, rarely offering moments of irony or humor. Compared to Western assassin films like John Wick, Ninja Assassin feels less polished but more ferocious. John Wick builds its world through rules and structure. Ninja Assassin throws you straight into chaos, where the only rule is survival. One is sleek and controlled, the other raw and savage. What this film arguably does better than many of its rivals is commitment. It never softens its tone to please everyone, but that same commitment is also its weakness. Where other films balance action with character depth, Ninja Assassin sacrifices emotional complexity for non-stop intensity. In the end, it doesn't try to outdo its genre rivals, it just picks a different lane entirely. And whether that lane feels exhilarating or exhausting depends entirely on what you're looking for in an action movie. When Ninja Assassin came out, reactions were split right down the middle. Critics were largely unforgiving, dismissing the film as shallow, overindulgent, and excessively violent. The thin plot and limited character development were common complaints, with many arguing that style completely overwhelmed substance. Audiences told a different story. Action fans and martial arts enthusiasts embraced the film's unapologetic intensity. For them, it delivered exactly what it promised: relentless combat, striking visuals, and a dark, no-compromise tone. Over time, this gap between critics and viewers became one of the film's defining traits. At the box office, the movie underperformed relative to expectations, especially given its international scope and high-profile producers. But its life didn't end there. Home media and streaming gave it a second wind, letting new viewers discover it without the baggage of opening week hype. Today, Ninja Assassin is often described as divisive rather than forgotten. Some still see it as excessive and hollow, others view it as an underrated cult classic that dared to go further than most mainstream releases of its time. That's the irony. What once hurt its reputation is exactly what keeps it remembered. In a sea of safe action movies, Ninja Assassin remains a bold, polarizing experience that refuses to quietly fade into obscurity. So where does Ninja Assassin ultimately land? At its best, it's a visceral action experience. The choreography is aggressive, the visual style is bold, and its commitment to a dark, unforgiving tone never wavers. It doesn't flirt with its ideas, it lunges at them, blades drawn. The film's biggest strength is also its biggest risk: total commitment. It never tries to please everyone, and that honesty gives it a raw energy most action films avoid. Rain's physical performance anchors the film, turning what could have been a generic revenge plot into something more personal and intense. But that focus comes at a cost. The story is thin, the emotional depth is limited, and the side characters often feel like pieces on a chessboard rather than fully realized people. Viewers looking for layered storytelling or philosophical depth may find it hollow. So who should watch Ninja Assassin? If you love stylized violence, martial arts action, revenge narratives, and dark cinematic worlds, this movie is for you. If you're sensitive to extreme gore or need strong character arcs to stay engaged, this might not be your fight. Final verdict: Ninja Assassin isn't subtle, it isn't gentle, and it isn't forgettable. It's a bold, divisive action film that knows exactly what it is and never apologizes for it, and sometimes, that's exactly what makes a movie worth watching. Reviews show Kosugi's character runs a secretive ninja clan that raises children from a young age, molding them into assassins and sending them out on deadly, paid missions. When one young girl in training steps out of line, she's hunted down and executed. Her close friend Rizzo survives, but the incident becomes the turning point that fuels his desire for revenge. Years later, he's hiding out in Germany, waiting for the right moment to strike back at the organization that destroyed his childhood. Meanwhile, a Europol investigator starts uncovering traces of the clan's activities, putting herself in serious danger. Rizzo is forced out of the shadows to protect her and ultimately to bring the murderous cult down for good. This is another hyper-stylized, excessively violent film backed by the Wachowskis, offering little narrative depth but plenty of bloodshed. Assassinations happen constantly and often without much logic, building toward an inevitable showdown where Rizzo faces wave after wave of masked killers while heavily armed agents mostly just stand around. After cutting through the rank-and-file ninjas, he has to face the clan's second-in-command before finally taking on his former master. Kosugi brings a memorable presence, leaning on traditional swordplay and a menacing, almost theatrical performance. Unfortunately, outside of him, there isn't much here to hold your interest unless you're already a fan of extreme violence and stylized combat. To be fair, expectations were already low. Hollywood has never been especially strong at ninja films. The genre's peak came decades ago, when low-budget action movies flooded the market and studios eagerly copied the formula. Since then, ninjas have mostly shown up as side elements rather than central figures. This film tries to bring them back into the spotlight, putting them front and center and treating everything else as an afterthought. As a result, the story threads and investigative subplots feel like interruptions rather than meaningful additions. The movie's intentions are obvious from the opening sequence, which dives straight into graphic carnage. The action rarely lets up, dominating the runtime as Rizzo battles squads of enemies or variations on the same encounter, including clashes between soldiers and ninja units. The CGI blood often looks artificial, but it's surprisingly effective here and doesn't detract as much as you'd expect. The acting and dialogue are predictably weak. Rain looks the part and moves with real physical discipline, but his performance is stiff and emotionally flat. The Europol storyline, despite two capable actors, never becomes compelling and ultimately feels unnecessary. Ryuk adds some flair as a polished antagonist, but the standout is clearly Sho Kwasugi, whose return to the screen is easily the film's strongest element. His presence alone elevates it for fans of classic ninja cinema. This isn't a film that demands much thought, and it doesn't reward it either. The story is thin, the dialogue painful, and every quiet moment feels like an obstacle between fight scenes. The combat is slick and brutal, though some viewers may find the visuals too dark or chaotic, and any momentum the fights build is often undercut by awkward conversations and weak storytelling. In Berlin, a Europol analyst uncovers evidence linking a series of political assassinations to an underground ninja network. When she becomes a target, Rizzo saves her and reveals his past as an orphan raised by the Ozunya clan, trained relentlessly to suppress emotion and obey without question. He once found comfort in another young trainee who dreamed of freedom. Her failed escape and execution pushed him to rebel, leaving him scarred and hunted by the very clan that raised him. If you're looking for depth, strong performances, or clever writing, you won't find them here. But if relentless combat, stylized violence, and a nostalgic throwback to old-school ninja imagery are enough for you, this might still be a guilty pleasure. As always, your mileage may vary. Ninja Assassin is a brutally stylized, fast-moving action spectacle that wears its access proudly. It follows Rizzo, a lethal warrior shaped from childhood by the ruthless Ozunya clan, who eventually turns against the very order that forged him. When Europol analyst Mika, Naomie Harris, uncovers the clan's bloody operations, she gets pulled into Rizzo's path of revenge, leading them into betrayal, captivity, and an all-out war against the assassins hunting them. There's no pretending this film is subtle. The narrative has visible cracks, and the characters are drawn in broad strokes, but the movie makes up for it with relentless momentum and hyper-violent set pieces that feel lifted straight out of a high-intensity video game. The fight choreography is sharp, aggressive, and visually inventive, with blades, chains, and exotic weapons slicing through opponents in showers of crimson. Fans of extreme action will find plenty to love here. For sheer entertainment value, this earns a solid 7/10. What really sets it apart is its unapologetic embrace of gore. Clearly influenced by directors like Takashi Miike, the film pushes bloodshed to almost cartoonish levels. Limbs severed, bodies torn apart, every major fight escalating into a frenzy of motion and carnage. This is ninja cinema turned up to 11. The plot itself is straightforward and predictable, but that simplicity actually works in its favor. There are no shocking twists, yet boredom never really sets in. The pacing stays tight from start to finish, and the action arrives early and rarely lets up. The dialogue is functional and direct, skipping unnecessary filler and keeping the story moving at full speed. One noticeable flaw: an ancient Japanese ninja clan communicating mostly in English feels historically and culturally off. It's clearly a choice made for accessibility, but more Japanese dialogue could have added authenticity. Similarly, the idea of the clan recruiting and training non-Japanese children stretches believability. Though these are minor issues within the film's exaggerated reality, the cast performs well across the board. Korean pop star Rain, despite having no formal martial arts background before filming, delivers an impressive physical performance as Rizzo. Veteran martial artist Sho Kwasugi lends real credibility and intensity as the relentless master hunting his former student, while Ryuk makes for a formidable rival in the final confrontation. Stylistically, the film blends Eastern martial traditions with Western action filmmaking, combining ancient codes of honor, swordplay, and ritual with modern digital effects. Wire work, CGI, and rapid editing give old-school ninja combat a contemporary edge, resulting in action that feels both nostalgic and technically modern. Because of its extreme violence, The theatrical cut was heavily censored in several countries and still received adult-only ratings worldwide. The unrated version, with significantly more blood and graphic detail, has since become the fan-preferred edition, cementing the film's reputation for savage intensity. This movie firmly belongs to the classic ninja subgenre that flourished in the 1980s, following in the footsteps of films like Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja, and Ninja 3, The Domination, but with modern polish and far less restraint. In the end, Ninja Assassin isn't about realism or depth, it's about speed, blades, blood, and vengeance. If you enjoy relentless martial arts action and don't shy away from extreme violence, this is a film you shouldn't miss. Those older films were part of the slickly produced canon era under Golan Globus, many directed by Sam Furstenberg. His work through the 1980s, including the American Ninja series and other action-heavy titles, helped define a low-budget but energetic martial arts style, often starring Michael Dudikoff. Years later, the ninja genre resurfaced in modern form with projects like Ninja 2009, and its sequel, but Ninja Assassin clearly aimed for something more stylized and extreme. Director James McTeigue openly cited Japanese anime influences like Ninja Scroll and Samurai Champloo, which explains the heightened violence and graphic exaggeration. Visually, the film leans into dark yet colorful imagery courtesy of cinematographer Carl Walter Lindenlaub, while Yelena Shkri's score keeps the momentum driving forward. McTeigue, who previously worked closely with the Wachowskis on V for Vendetta, brings a polished, big studio feel to the production, and producer Joel Silver's fingerprints, a pushing spectacle and intensity are unmistakable. One critic even called it the greatest ninja movie of all time, a bold claim that's hard not to raise an eyebrow at. The opening minutes almost tip the film into self-parody, and it's tempting to switch it off early, but stick with it and it settles into a familiar martial arts narrative. A gifted student breaks from his ruthless master, only to return later as a force of vengeance. It's a story that's been told countless times, and this film makes no attempt to reinvent it. What it does do is raise the bar for sheer excess. It may be one of the most brutally violent entries in the genre, overflowing with decapitations, fountains of blood, and gravity-defying combat. You'd almost expect the next entry in the genre to try to outdo it just for the sake of escalation. Claims of being pleasantly surprised by all this carnage or baffling unless flying limbs and arterial spray are your idea of a welcome shock. Maybe the most accurate summary comes early on, from an elderly tattoo artist who warns that the killer is a demon sent straight from hell. An oddly fitting description. Realism was never part of the ninja fantasy, and this film makes no effort to respect physics, logic, or probability. Characters survive the impossible, coincidences stack endlessly, and the plot exists mainly as a framework to move from one massacre to the next. That said, for viewers who want relentless action, the movie delivers exactly that. Black-clad, masked assassins emerge from the shadows in endless waves, wielding razor-sharp weapons with acrobatic flair. The choreography is fast, polished, and heavily CGI-enhanced, as renegade ninja Rizzo, Rain, fights for survival against the very clan that raised him. Running alongside this is a thin investigative subplot involving Europol agent Mika Coretti, who uncovers a pattern linking a string of high-profile assassinations, a trail that inevitably leads to Rizzo and puts them both in the clan's crosshairs. Flashbacks fill in the brutal training, emotional cruelty, and personal betrayal that drove him to abandon the order. Anyone looking for nuance or restraint should look elsewhere. Limbs are severed, bodies are split apart, and blood coats nearly every frame. For fans of extreme, over-the-top ninja action, it's a loud, savage, shameless piece of popcorn cinema that knows exactly what it is and never pretends otherwise. From the very first scene, the film makes it clear what kind of ride you're in for. If the opening doesn't turn you away, you'll likely enjoy what follows. The action is carefully staged and, while heavily CGI-enhanced at times, still delivers real excitement and more than a few moments that make you flinch. The plot is straightforward, But that's not really a problem. It exists mainly to move the action along, and it does that job well. The performances are solid across the board. Rain stands out in the lead role, bringing both physical presence and intensity. Cho Kal-soogi is convincingly intimidating as Lord Oz-Junyu, the mentor-turned-antagonist, and supporting turns from Naomie Harris and Ben Miles help ground the film. Overall, this is an easy recommendation for fans of blade and martial combat action films that carries the atmosphere of East Asian cinema without needing subtitles or suffering from awkward dubbing, though that wouldn't have bothered this reviewer anyway. Without exaggeration, this is one of the most violently graphic ninja or kung fu films around. The story centers on a secret ninja clan that's operated for centuries, carrying out assassinations worldwide for a steep price. Children are raised inside the organization under harsh, merciless conditions, where weakness means death and disobedience isn't tolerated. Rizzo is one such child, and he eventually rebels and escapes, turning against the very clan that shaped him. For martial arts fans, there are plenty of well-executed fight scenes. The one drawback is that many happen at night, making the action hard to see. For those who enjoy over-the-top violence, the film delivers. Fatal strikes come with exaggerated sprays of blood clearly designed for shock and spectacle. Much of the gore is digitally enhanced, similar to graphic novel-inspired films, while other scenes rely on more traditional effects. Still unrealistic in quantity but visually striking. This isn't a movie that asks you to think deeply. It's pure entertainment, made for turning your brain off and enjoying the chaos. Rizzo's backstory follows a familiar arc: an orphan trained in a brutal system who eventually turns against his master over cruelty and moral conflict. His teacher, Oz-Junyu, is openly abusive, and that mistreatment becomes the catalyst for Rizzo's escape and eventual vendetta. From there, he becomes both a target of the clan and a disruptor of its operations. While the film excels at action, it also stretches believability to the breaking point in several places. Fans who watch purely for spectacle will likely shrug this off, but viewers who prefer realism may find it distracting. Personally, that lack of grounding lowered the overall impression, leaving the film feeling average and aimed more at younger audiences. That said, two elements help keep it interesting. One is the twist on the traditional martial arts mentor-student relationship. Instead of a wise teacher figure, the master here is basically a villain, and the student's rebellion comes from conscience rather than ambition. It's also refreshing to see ninjas portrayed less as noble warriors and more as treacherous assassins, even if they're still given near mystical abilities. The other strength is in how the action is filmed. Martial arts movies often focus purely on physical performance, but here the camera occasionally pushes into more experimental territory. One central sequence, beginning with the hero's escape, stands out visually, using slow motion, lighting manipulation, and fractured timing to create a striking cinematic effect. The opening and final action scenes are more conventional, but that middle stretch feels like a deliberate stylistic experiment. You don't need a great movie to introduce visual innovation. Plenty of loud, mindless blockbusters have contributed new ideas to action filmmaking despite weak stories, and this one feels almost like a testing ground for visual techniques, playing with time, light, and cause and effect in ways that suggest genuine interest in pushing the medium forward, even if the story itself stays simple. In the end, it's flashy, violent, and shallow. But for viewers who enjoy relentless action and stylized combat, that may be more than enough. From the very start, Ninja Assassin has no interest in realism. This is loud, excessive, over-the-top Hollywood action that gleefully pushes the human body far past any believable limit. Characters survive injuries that would end normal lives instantly, and the ninjas move with such impossible speed they seem more like shadows or afterimages than people. It's outrageous, unapologetic, and strangely entertaining if you are willing to accept its absurd rules. Rain takes center stage as Rizzo, a man raised from childhood by the ruthless Oz-Junyu clan to become a living weapon. Under the iron grip of Azunue played with real intimidation by Shokasugi, kidnapped children are molded into emotionless killers. Rizo's conditioning shatters when his lover Kiriko was brutally executed for trying to escape the clan, a moment that finally pushes him to turn against the only life he's known. Marked for death, he becomes both hunter and prey. Running alongside his story is Europol analyst Mika Coretti, Naomie Harris, who begins uncovering a disturbing pattern behind a series of political assassinations, suspecting that governments are secretly outsourcing murders to a hidden ninja organization. Her investigation puts her directly in the Azunue clan's sights, forcing an uneasy alliance with Rizo as assassins and authorities close in from every side. Narratively, this is familiar ground, a deadly warrior seeking redemption by destroying the system that made him. There's nothing groundbreaking about the path the story takes, but the script does try to give Rizo genuine emotional motivation rather than making him just a mindless killing machine. Flashbacks to his brutal training add context and help justify his violent crusade, even if the emotional depth stays fairly simple. Where the film really earns its keep is in the action. The violence is extreme, sometimes cartoonishly so, with limbs severed, bodies shredded, and blood flowing in near operatic excess. CGI gore is everywhere, paired with practical effects that make Rizo's injuries especially hard to watch. Logic gets sacrificed regularly, particularly around how much punishment Rizo can absorb without slowing down. But spectacle clearly wins out over plausibility. The choreography is relentless and inventive. Sword combat, throwing stars, and chain blades used in wildly exaggerated ways that defy physics but still look impressive. Seeing traditional ninja combat transplanted into a modern, urban European setting gives the film its own distinct identity, and the second half ramps things up considerably with bigger, bolder set pieces than most martial arts films attempt. Some plot mechanics near the climax raise questions, especially around the tracking devices and certain character decisions, but these don't derail the experience. The pacing stays tight across a roughly 100-minute runtime, and the film rarely slows down long enough for its flaws to become deal-breakers. In the end, Ninja Assassin knows exactly what it is: not subtle, not realistic, not intellectually demanding. It's a blood-soaked, hyper-stylized action throwback that channels 1980s genre cinema through modern effects. For fans of ninja mythology, martial arts chaos, and unapologetic excess, it delivers plenty of entertainment. Just don't expect restraint or realism. Watching this on Blu-ray recently, the visuals left a strong impression. The disc also includes several deleted scenes that add a bit more context to Mika's investigation, though none feel essential to the main story. The film really shines in its action, from a brutal ninja assault on a Europol facility, to an intense roadside fight with traffic tearing past the combatants, to a fiery final confrontation inside a burning dojo with embers floating through the air as long-standing rivals clash. Rizo's signature weapon, a blade on a long chain, is used to devastating effect, slicing through enemies with real precision. In terms of sheer excess, the film rivals some of the most famous over-the-top martial arts finales ever put on screen. Only here everything is drenched in color, making the bloodshed impossible to ignore. This is easily among the most graphic big-budget action films to get a theatrical release. Limbs are severed, bodies split apart, and the screen is frequently flooded with blood. The violence is extreme and unapologetic. One nice touch is how the filmmakers initially treat the ninjas as shadowy figures, silent, unseen, threatening, revealing them only in flashes during the early action scenes. The choreography leans into dramatic poses and highly stylized movement, keeping the fights visually engaging throughout, and the ninja arsenal is a highlight, especially the razor-sharp throwing stars that look genuinely lethal. For a film with a reported budget around $40 million, the production quality holds up impressively, even on Blu-ray. The digital blood effects look reasonably good, and it's worth noting much of the movie was shot in Berlin. The performances are solid across the board. Rain, better known for his music career, fits the role convincingly and clearly puts serious work into the physical preparation. Sho Kosugi's return to film as the primary antagonist is a real bonus, especially given how long he'd been away from the screen. No one should expect awards-level storytelling, though the film does try to give Rizzo some emotional grounding through flashbacks. Ultimately, this isn't about deep narrative, it's about savage, stylish, high-energy martial arts mayhem, and on that front, it delivers exactly what it promises. The Blu-ray presentation itself looks excellent, too. The story follows Europol agent Mika, with her partner Ryan mostly in the background, as she uncovers evidence that secret ninja clans still exist, carrying out deadly contracts in the modern world. Rizzo, raised in one of these clans, is explored mostly through flashbacks that provide just enough backstory to stay engaging. Though character depth clearly isn't the main draw. To be blunt, this film is exactly what it looks like. The creative team aimed for exaggerated, hyper-stylized spectacle, and that vision comes through loud and clear. The ninjas stay intimidating largely because they rarely fully reveal themselves, striking from darkness and leaving carnage in their wake. When they do appear openly, it's almost always mid-kill or mid-fight, which reinforces their mystique. The choreography is fast, fluid, and visually inventive, using swords, chains, and throwing weapons with flair, and the slow motion and unusual camera angles keep the constant violence from becoming monotonous. The ninjas stalk their targets like predators, giving some moments a feel closer to a creature feature than a traditional martial arts film. There's a decent variety of locations, including a memorable showdown on a crowded city street, with one very unlucky pedestrian caught in the middle. The plot itself is thin and clearly secondary, which actually works in the film's favor. It doesn't drag, wrapping up in under 90 minutes, which makes it a good pick for a casual watch. This is the kind of movie where the human body seems about as durable as damp paper. The dialogue is sparse and often clunky, but thankfully kept to a minimum. The finale is satisfying, delivering a showdown that feels earned after all the build-up. Viewers should be warned, the violence is relentless, graphic, and often disturbing, with a large body count and frequent strong language. The home release also includes several minutes of deleted scenes that are interesting, if not essential. If you enjoy hyper-violent, stylized ninja action and know what you're signing up for, this is an easy recommendation as long as your expectations are set right. Going in, I fully expected this movie to be a mess, and honestly, it never pretends to be anything more than what it is. At its core, it's about a young man who turns his back on a brutal ninja upbringing and faces the full wrath of the assassin clan that raised him. Along the way, a European law enforcement agency uncovers centuries of political killings carried out by these shadowy warriors, pulling our anti-hero into a predictable but energetic conflict. The basic setup isn't too far removed from something like Wanted, and it carries a strong comic book sensibility throughout, which makes sense once you learn a writer with deep comic book roots was involved. Even though it's an original property, visually, it has a distinct identity. The action is often presented in an almost impressionistic way. You don't always follow every punch or blade swing, but the sweeping motion, sharp contrasts of light and dark, and splashes of color more than make up for it. The ninjas seem to melt into the shadows, reinforcing the film's atmosphere. This isn't a subtle movie by any measure, and the violence is extreme, especially early on, with an eye-watering amount of gore. Performances are serviceable rather than standout. Rain carries the film as the conflicted rogue warrior, while Naomie Harris does what she can as a forensic researcher caught in the chaos. No one embarrasses themselves, but no one elevates the material either. As an example of stylish, over-the-top genre cinema, it actually works fairly well, and it kept me entertained, which makes it all the more puzzling that the studio chose not to screen it for critics, a move that usually signals a disaster is coming. The box office underperformance may stem from that decision, since there are far worse films that get much kinder treatment. If you're coming for ninjas, this movie absolutely delivers. There are ninjas everywhere, meaning constant combat. Some of the fight sequences are genuinely exciting, and the final showdown goes all out, and the blood there's no shortage of it, spraying, pouring, and flooding the screen in quantities that border on absurd. That said, it's nowhere near a martial arts classic. Despite hopping between different countries, everything feels oddly confined, as if most scenes were shot on the same handful of sets. The choreography also suffers from a common problem in Western martial arts films: too many tight close-ups and frantic cuts, combined with fight scenes shot in near darkness, making it hard to tell exactly what's happening. There's also a missed opportunity in never developing a romantic connection between the two leads, despite clear setup and chemistry. Even with all that, this isn't a bad movie. It never bored me, and it clearly commits to giving its target audience what it wants. If you enjoy ninja-themed action, there's more than enough here to justify a watch. At heart, this is a slick celebration of excess, violent, flashy, and unapologetic. The story follows a man raised as a deadly weapon who seeks revenge after betrayal costs him everything, eventually teaming up with European agents to bring down those responsible for countless assassinations. The narrative unfolds exactly as you'd expect, mainly as an excuse to pack in as much combat as possible in the shortest amount of time. The director clearly knows how to stage action, but the script feels stitched together from familiar martial arts tropes. Character depth is minimal, empathy is nearly non-existent, and supporting roles are little more than functional placeholders. Any emotional grounding the lead gets early on quickly gets buried under waves of increasingly graphic confrontation. Still, the movie is honest about what it is and who it's for. No one should walk into a film titled Ninja Assassin expecting awards recognition or a broad appeal. It's aimed squarely at fans of violent, stylized ninja action, and on that front, it delivers exactly what it promises. This movie is about as pure a ninja spectacle as you can get, far from original, outrageously violent, soaked in blood and gore, and yet undeniably entertaining. The story centers on Rizzo, Rain, the most skilled warrior trained by a hidden ninja clan that abducts children young, strips them of identity, and raises them as deadly tools under a cold, authoritative master. These children are renamed, reshaped, and molded into assassins with no room for compassion. Rizzo's carefully conditioned world starts to unravel when he forms a forbidden bond with a rebellious young trainee, one of the few characters who shows real humanity. When she's brutally killed for stepping out of line, something in him finally breaks. Ordered to execute another disobedient girl, he refuses, turns against the clan, and barely escapes with his life. From there, he becomes a hunted man. In the present, Rizzo crosses paths with Mika, a determined researcher whose investigation into financial crimes has unknowingly put her and the ninja syndicate's crosshairs. As assassins close in, he steps in to protect her, recognizing the same goodness in her that once sparked his own rebellion. What follows is a near-constant barrage of action, as Rizzo, Mika, and increasingly involved police and tactical forces collide head-on with the ninja elite. There's a lot more going on than described here, intentionally so, but it's fair to say the film opens hard and rarely slows down. It delivers exactly what it promises: relentless combat, excessive bloodshed, and stylized violence purely for spectacle. Despite leaning heavily on familiar tropes borrowed from countless action films, it succeeds because it never pretends to be anything deeper than it is. This is entertainment, first and last. That said, this isn't a movie designed to appeal to everyone, nor does it feel built for massive box office success. It's targeted at viewers who want fast, flashy, mindless fun with zero expectation of nuance. Switch off your critical brain, and it's easy to get pulled into its exaggerated world of shadowy assassins and brutal honor codes. One of the film's stronger elements is how it blends traditional ninja mythology with modern settings. Instead of a poetic, slow-burn martial arts drama, it throws ninjas into chaotic urban environments: blades against guns, stealth against riot gear, ancient tactics against SWAT teams. Some of the most enjoyable moments come from these clashes, especially a street-level fight that stands out for its sheer energy. On the downside, the movie tries to cram too many ideas into a short runtime, The flashbacks are overused, the CGI blood often looks artificial to the point of distraction, and the film never fully convinces us that Rizzo deserves his reputation as the deadliest assassin alive. We're told he's the best, but rarely shown why until late in the film, when he suddenly takes on overwhelming odds and survives through sheer endurance. Another uncomfortable element is the extreme abuse inflicted on the children during training. It's likely meant to emphasize the clan's cruelty, but the repeated brutality can be genuinely hard to watch. Still, none of this should be a surprise. Anyone picking up a movie titled Ninja Assassin already knows roughly what they're getting. This is not a family film. It's excessively violent, unapologetically gory, and absolutely not for younger viewers. On a personal note, I went in expecting to mock this movie. Friends had teased me, assuming I'd roll my eyes at something so over the top. Instead, I ended up enjoying it more than expected, proof that a film can succeed simply by committing fully to its own absurdity. That said, it isn't without frustration that the characters feel paper-thin. The trailer basically gives away the whole plot, and the final confrontation stretches believability to the breaking point. When the solution becomes send everyone in with guns, it undercuts the whole mystique of ninja warfare, replacing subtlety with chaos. In the end, this plays like a loud, messy love letter to excessive action cinema. Flawed, ridiculous, and often unintentionally funny, but if you're in the mood for a no-thinking required ninja bloodbath, it delivers exactly that. Just don't expect anything more. I won't spend much time on what the Europol agents contribute to this film, because their presence feels almost entirely unnecessary. They exist mainly to justify one poorly executed action scene, which oddly ends with a ninja getting taken out by a spinning car maneuver, a moment that sums up much of the film's missed potential. While some of the fight choreography is impressive in isolation, it's frequently undermined by weak cinematography. Lighting is a major issue, and many scenes are so dark it's nearly impossible to tell who's attacking whom. You could argue that suits the stealthy nature of ninja combat, but when the audience genuinely can't follow the action, it just becomes frustrating. Add excessive shaky camera work during chase scenes and a habit of filming fights far too close, and the result feels chaotic rather than thrilling. This could have been a modern take on the ninja genre, but instead it lacks both visual flair and narrative depth. A disappointing outcome given the setup. Rizzo, Rain, is raised from childhood to be a lethal, emotionless assassin. After completing his first mission, he turns his back on his brutal, sadistic mentor, Azunyu, played with real authority by Sho Kosugi, and lives in hiding, fully aware that escaping his past means a constant threat to his life. Meanwhile, Agent Coretti begins uncovering rumors of a secret ninja organization that carries out assassinations for governments and wealthy clients, and her investigation puts a target on her back, forcing an uneasy alliance with Rizzo as the two try to survive. In the wake of Tarantino's Kill Bill films, ultra-violent martial arts cinema saw renewed popularity, and this movie clearly tries to capitalize on that. With a well-known Asian pop star in the lead and strong appetite overseas for stylized violence in Japanese cinema, the film understandably drew attention abroad. That said, the violence here goes to absurd extremes. Limbs severed, heads roll, blood spray so often it borders on excess even by genre standards. Director James McTeigue delivers tighter, more straightforward action film than some of his earlier work, pairing Rain's physical presence with Kosugi's commanding villain performance. Supporting turns from Naomie Harris, Rick Yoon, Ben Miles, and Sung Kang are solid, even if some characters end up forgettable. Harris in particular stands out, bringing real ability despite limited dialogue, and Sung Kang also contributes well, though his role leans more toward physical action than character development. The film offers plenty of combat, and despite criticism about overly dark visuals, many of the battle scenes actually read clearer on the big screen than expected. This is very much a traditional martial arts movie following a familiar formula. Viewers should be prepared for heavy violence and graphic imagery, as this isn't a film for sensitive audiences. though sexual content is minimal and the focus stays firmly on action. One drawback is the film's reliance on the same visual gimmick across multiple action scenes. Effective at first, but repetition dulls its impact, and by the final confrontation the outcome feels predictable. Still, the finale manages to entertain. One interesting angle the film explores is how consistently the ninjas overpower enemies armed with guns and body armor, reinforcing the idea that skill and speed beat firepower. Overall, this is a gritty, ultra-violent ninja movie worth watching at least once. It marks a return of ninjas to mainstream cinema, clearly intended for adult audiences. While the action is fast-paced and often stylish, it sometimes moves too quickly to fully take in what's happening on screen. The story feels scattered and occasionally sloppy, but the core premise, a rogue assassin escaping an evil ninja clan, remains compelling. Much of the film's draw comes from Rain's involvement, which explains its strong pull with Asian audiences. Despite its flaws, it stands as a brutal, modern homage to classic martial arts cinema. All things considered, the lead does an acceptable job. Not exceptional, but his physical presence, strength, and natural athleticism suit the role well. The overall storyline isn't groundbreaking, but the flashback sequences are a real highlight and easily the most engaging parts of the film. Ideally, the movie performs well enough financially to justify a sequel, because there's clear potential here, or at the very least, it might encourage studios not to shy away from more hard-R action films. At the center of the story is a shadowy, ancient organization that abducts children and reshapes them into ruthless assassins, stripping them of emotion, identity, and any sense of a normal life. These warriors are trained to move unseen, striking before their targets ever sense danger. The film follows Rizzo, a highly skilled ninja disillusioned with the life forced on him. Now living in isolation in Berlin, he severed ties with the clan that raised him. Meanwhile, Mika, a determined forensic analyst, begins uncovering the truth behind the group, putting herself in real danger. As their paths cross, the two join forces to confront the organization, with a subtle romantic connection developing amid the chaos. For a modern ninja film, this one is surprisingly well constructed and entertaining. It blends contemporary espionage elements with frequent flashbacks revealing Rizzo's brutal upbringing. While unapologetically violent, often to extreme levels, it still tries to give the characters growth and internal conflict rather than leaning solely on action. The choreography is impressive throughout, and the involvement of high-profile producers shows in the polished look and execution. Some viewers and critics complained about the film's intensity, even claiming audiences walked out early. But honestly, anyone who leaves a movie called Ninja Assassin because it delivers exactly that probably misread what they signed up for. I expected ninjas, assassins, and excessive violence, and that's precisely what I got. What surprised me was a genuinely coherent backstory, a structured narrative, and a more serious tone than expected. Yes, the violence is outrageous and often absurdly over the top, but that excess is part of the appeal. Are there plot holes? Absolutely. Are some moments cheesy? A little, but less than expected. Instead of leaning fully into camp, the film maintains a surprisingly serious atmosphere backed by solid performances and effects that feel more artistic than cheap. For fans of classic ninja films, this serves as a brutal but respectful throwback, well worth the price of admission for action lovers. Rain leads as the outcast warrior Rizzo, and his background as a performer shows in the way he moves, and his fight sequences feel fluid, controlled, and almost poetic. His character is quiet and emotionally reserved, and while he occasionally feels underdeveloped, he still works as a believable lead. His acting shows promise, even if he's clearly still growing into the role. Naomie Harris delivers a strong supporting turn as Mika. Like Rizzo, her character isn't given much depth, but she brings energy and conviction, and her chemistry with Rain nearly convinces you that intelligence and determination could stand up to near-invisible killing machines. Ben Miles appears as the lead Europol agent, though his role feels underused, with potential for more depth that never quite materializes. Director James Mcteigue clearly demonstrates his strengths here. With experience on major productions and an already established visual style, he brings a confident hand to the action, letting the ninjas move through darkness and shadow in a way that feels stylish rather than artificial, without over-relying on flashy CGI. The story may not be deep, but it exists, supported by a full exploration of the protagonist's origins and training. The action sequences are relentless, the choreography sharp, the bloodshed constant, the death scenes are excessive, outrageous, and undeniably gruesome. But for fans of extreme action cinema, that's part of the fun. This is full throttle, no apologies action movie making, built to get your blood pumping. Is it going to sweep award ceremonies or earn critical praise? Absolutely not. But does it justify the ticket price? Without question. As a straight-up action spectacle, it delivers exactly what it promises, even if it's been judged more harshly than it deserves. That said, this is also a deeply flawed film. When I first sat down to watch it, I was convinced I was about to enjoy something genuinely cool. That feeling didn't last long. Part of my confusion may have come from the modern setting, which made me realize I was actually in the mood for something else entirely, namely Shogun Assassin, itself a compilation drawn from the Lone Wolf and Cub films. This movie has nothing to do with those classics. Instead, it revolves around secretive ninja clans hiring themselves out as assassins for an absurdly large sum of gold, operating in secrecy, existing mostly as myths and whispers. Frankly, that's probably for the best, because these warriors are portrayed as nearly unstoppable, which raises serious questions about how modern law enforcement, with all its technology, could ever hope to defeat them. The narrative itself is thin and unremarkable. 8 children are abducted, subjected to brutal, borderline cruel training, and eventually unleashed on the world as living weapons. Given how effective they're shown to be, it's almost laughable they haven't already taken over the globe. A conventional military wouldn't stand a chance. Predictably, one of these ninjas eventually rebels, crosses paths with a forensic investigator uncovering the truth behind the assassinations, and, with the reluctant help of international law enforcement whose loyalties seem questionable at best, they track down and destroy one of the clans. Several more are left standing, which feels less like a narrative choice and more like a setup for unnecessary sequels. Set largely in Berlin, the film follows Europol agent Mika Coretti, who discovers links between a series of high-profile murders and ancient ninja organizations. She's saved from an assassination attempt by Rizzo, a rogue ninja on the run from his former clan, and together they work to dismantle the organization that raised him, as Rizzo seeks revenge for the loss of someone he loved. Released in 2009, the film grew out of the creator's desire to work again with Rain after his martial arts showcase in Speed Racer, reuniting him with director James Mcteigue following their earlier collaboration on V for Vendetta. Unfortunately, the rushed development of the script shows a late rewrite just weeks before filming led to a messy structure, excessive flashbacks, unresolved plot threads, and murky motivations. Still, its clear storytelling was never the priority here. The movie exists to showcase elaborate fight choreography, explosive set pieces, and stylized combat, and in that respect it largely succeeds. At its heart, it's a simple revenge tale following a path longtime genre fans will instantly recognize, and even the casting choices feel like intentional nods to classic ninja cinema. The investigative subplot seems meant to add depth but ultimately goes nowhere. There are hints of powerful forces working behind the scenes that never get explored in any meaningful way, and despite references to multiple clans, they barely factor into the story. The action itself is generally well executed, with energetic fight scenes and exaggerated ninja theatrics, though a prolonged sequence in a dark underground location suffers from poor visibility, rapid editing, and overused effects that make it hard to follow. The excessive CGI blood also takes something away from otherwise solid choreography. In the end, this film knows exactly what it is and doesn't pretend to be smarter or deeper than it actually is. For viewers looking for relentless action, stylized violence, and over-the-top ninja mayhem, it delivers precisely that and nothing more. At its core, the film struggles to balance a simple revenge storyline with a half-developed investigation plot that never fully pays off. Despite that, it's carried by a strong screen presence from Rizzo, who convincingly embodies a lethal ninja and proves capable of leading an action-heavy film. It doesn't do much to rise above familiar genre tropes, but it still works as a fast-paced, no-frills action experience for fans of swordplay and brutal combat. It delivers enough entertainment to justify the runtime. This is very much a movie made for action lovers. The filmmakers clearly opted for stylized, exaggerated blood effects, likely to avoid pushing the violence into more restrictive rating territory, and for the most part it works. My main frustration was that many fight scenes take place in dim lighting, making the choreography hard to follow at times. That said, the premise is straightforward. A hidden clan of elite ninja assassins kills for the highest bidder, and Rizzo, once their most gifted student, turns against them after they murder the girl he cares about. From that point on, he becomes their primary target, and because of his superior skills, he manages to survive while staying one step ahead of his former masters. Meanwhile, Mika, an investigator looking into a suspicious murder, uncovers clues pointing to the clan's existence, putting her life in danger. After Rizzo saves her, the two form an uneasy alliance to bring the organization down. What follows is exactly what you'd expect: frequent sword fights, ambushes, violent confrontations, building to a conclusion that fits the story being told. Rain's portrayal of Rizzo is one of the film's biggest strengths. From the opening moments, the movie throws the audience into graphic, well-executed action as Rizzo battles fellow ninjas inside a dojo before narrowly escaping. Flashbacks explore his brutal training, his favoritism within the clan, and his bond with a young female trainee when tragedy strikes. He's forced to flee, barely surviving the consequences of his defiance. The film also cuts between his storyline and the pursuit led by European law enforcement, blending both narratives smoothly enough to keep things moving. The weapons used add variety to the action, and the violence, while intense, never feels absurd or poorly rendered. The visual effects, particularly the blood work, are stylized but effective. Overall, this stands as a solid ninja action film and arguably one of the stronger modern entries in the genre. Compared to weaker Hollywood attempts like Blood, The Last Vampire, it's at least consistently watchable and far more engaging. Several smart creative choices help elevate the experience. Rain, a major Korean pop star, looks every bit the part thanks to his athletic build and disciplined physicality. While he isn't on the level of legendary martial arts icons, the filmmakers wisely emphasize sharp choreography and fluid movement over traditional hand-to-hand combat, which pairs well with the sleek cinematography and polished CGI. Another smart move was casting Naomie Harris, a capable actress with a strong copyright who brings real credibility to her role, and there's even a brief spark of chemistry between her and Rain that adds some emotional grounding. Ultimately, Ninja Assassin is enjoyable, turn-your-brain-off entertainment. It's far from the definitive ninja movie, but it delivers exactly what it promises. As someone who grew up fascinated by ninjas and even dressed as one every Halloween for years, this film tapped right into the childhood excitement. The narrative isn't always airtight, but the flashbacks, especially those centered on Rizzo's harsh training under Azunue, carry real emotional weight. The inclusion of genre legend Sho Kosugi feels like a tribute to longtime ninja fans. Watching him share scenes with Rain was genuinely exciting, and his portrayal of Azunue cold, cruel, yet strangely principled adds a real depth. The opening exploration of ninja mythology immediately sets a serious, intense tone that signals the film's commitment to its world, and the final act goes all out, delivering a climax packed with action and emotional payoff that should satisfy most action fans. My only lingering complaint is that Mika's character could have used more depth. As for performances, Rain commands the screen even if his acting occasionally feels stiff. He looks convincing, moves well, and sells the physicality of the role. Naomie Harris does solid work despite limited material, while Ben Miles and Rick Yoon both play their parts effectively, and Sho Kosugi stands out as an imposing, memorable presence. Backed by strong creative talent behind the scenes, the movie had all the ingredients for a standout martial arts film, and while it may not fully reach its potential, it remains an entertaining watch. Rizo's journey from orphan to elite assassin to hunted renegade anchors the story, while Mika's investigation into a global web of assassinations adds intrigue. In the end, the film may not be flawless, but it succeeds as a stylish, action-packed tribute to ninja cinema. Mika ultimately becomes a marked woman after drawing the attention of the Black Sands clan, forcing her to align with Rizo in an effort to dismantle the organization hunting them. On paper, Ninja Assassin should have worked, but in execution it stumbles badly. One of its biggest issues is tonal confusion as the film treats its premise with extreme seriousness, particularly through the police investigation subplot and Rizo's traumatic childhood flashbacks, yet this clashes sharply with the immature, excessive presentation of violence. It feels like the movie wants to deliver gritty drama while simultaneously indulging in over-the-top gore, and the balance never quite lands. The film clearly aims to blend the stylized carnage of Kill Bill with the slow-motion spectacle of 300. Limbs are severed, heads roll, bodies are sliced apart with reckless enthusiasm. Several scenes lean heavily on slow motion, including one that strongly recalls the opening visuals of the Battle of Thermopylae, just with ninjas sliding into frame instead of Spartan soldiers. It's an exciting idea, but the execution falls short as the action is overloaded with weak CGI that makes it look artificial and weightless, and much of the fighting is obscured by dim lighting and frantic editing that makes it hard to follow. Ironically, the strongest fight scene comes near the climax, when Rizo faces one of his rivals, and works largely because it's properly lit and edited with some restraint, letting the choreography breathe. Unfortunately, moments like that are rare. Elsewhere, sloppy editing undermines otherwise promising scenes, especially the chase through the streets of Berlin, which should have been thrilling but instead feels disjointed. With its exaggerated blood effects, comic book visuals, and strange fusion of police procedural and ninja mythology, the film often feels like something made by a teenager trying to cram everything cool into one movie, with the camera seemingly obsessed with lingering on the cartoonish brutality. Elements like near-magical healing and the hyper-stylized violence give it an unfortunate resemblance to Wanted, not exactly a flattering comparison. The performances don't do much to lift the material. Rain is serviceable as the lead, but clearly struggles at times with English dialogue. Naomie Harris delivers a surprisingly flat performance, disappointing given her strong work in films like 28 Days Later and Skyfall. The weakest performance belongs to Ben Miles, whose stiff delivery stands out for all the wrong reasons. Despite a reported $40 million budget, the film feels far cheaper as the CGI is unconvincing. The main temple setting is obviously a constructed set, and Berlin is barely explored beyond a handful of locations. For a story centered on elite international assassins, the lack of global scope is glaring. By comparison, Hannah, released 2 years later on a smaller budget, managed to showcase multiple European and North African locations with a stronger cast. Ninja Assassin needed more practical effects and a more thoughtfully developed narrative. Spoiler warning: the final act collapses under the weight of several plot inconsistencies. Rizo removing a GPS tracker is predictable enough, but the sudden arrival of Japanese police at a remote mountain temple raises serious questions about timing and logistics, given how isolated and defensible the temple is. The rapid military response makes little sense. To make matters worse, the ninjas suddenly acquire super speed and shadow teleportation abilities with no explanation whatsoever. Ultimately, this is a disappointment. It should have been a wild, entertaining action film, but instead it leans too heavily on gore while failing to deliver coherent or exciting choreography. I expected far more. That said, I still remember the Enter the Ninja trailer back in 1980, long before I ever actually saw the film, and that movie now feels tame by comparison. Ninja Assassin is undeniably extreme. The story follows a young man raised in an orphanage designed to train children into lethal assassins. Years later, one of those orphans, Rizzo, turns against the clan and seizes his shot at freedom. After honing his skills, he reveals himself by protecting Mika, a woman whose discoveries put her directly in the clan's crosshairs, and he'll stop at nothing to keep her alive. From that angle, the film is undeniably intense, and the violence is relentless, the bloodshed excessive, the kills brutally graphic. Among ninja films, this one stands out for sheer ferocity. Deeply flawed, yes, but it's still one of the most hardcore entries in the genre, pushing ninjutsu to an almost absurd extreme. Martial arts films have rarely avoided excess, and since the loss of icons like Bruce Lee and, later, David Carradine, the genre has steadily faded from mainstream appeal. Every so often, though, a film comes along that reminds audiences why these stories mattered in the first place. Despite its many problems, Ninja Assassin still stands as one of the more memorable attempts in recent years, even if it ultimately falls short of its potential. Director James McTeigue doesn't merely push boundaries here, he tears straight through them, reintroducing martial arts violence in a way that's unapologetically brutal and aimed squarely at adult audiences. This isn't a film for the squeamish. At its core, the story blends forbidden love with rigid tradition, clan loyalty, and lethal codes of honor, all relocated into a modern setting. Conflict ignites when a gifted pupil, Rizzo, rebels against his ruthless ninja master and ultimately turns on the very order that raised him. Once marked for death, he finds himself constantly pursued, caught between his former mentor, fellow assassins, and their next unsuspecting victims. His only allies come from outside this shadow world, determined officers Ben Miles and Mika Coretti, who slowly unravel the mystery behind a string of savage killings. Standing in stark contrast is Ozunyu, played with chilling intensity by Sho Kosugi, whose presence alone reinforces the film's lethal tone. For viewers craving a violent depiction of ninja mythology, this film delivers in excess. Bloodshed is constant, rage fuels nearly every confrontation, and the action rarely pauses long enough to let the audience breathe. It's a far cry from the sanitized martial arts fare of the past. Back in the early to mid-1980s, ninjas briefly dominated pop culture, treated almost like masked superheroes gifted with impossible agility, inhuman strength, and near supernatural abilities. That era produced countless low-budget films, most following the same revenge-driven formula. One ninja wrongs another, and the cycle of vengeance begins. Ninja Assassin tries to resurrect that long-abandoned genre with modern visuals and extreme violence, but the execution ultimately falls short of its ambition. The film leans heavily on exaggerated gore and hyper-stylized combat, which weakens any emotional weight the story tries to carry. The narrative feels fragmented, and while the performances are serviceable and no worse than those in classic 80s ninja films, the standout is undeniably Sho Kosugi, whose menacing presence recalls the genre's earlier days. Still, the film struggles to strike the right balance. It takes itself very seriously, yet keeps undercutting that seriousness with moments that drift into outright absurdity. One undeniable strength lies behind the camera, with James McTeigue directing and the Wachowskis producing. The film benefits from a sleek, polished presentation, and without their involvement it likely would have faded into obscurity. Even so, while the movie is entertaining on the surface, it rarely rises above being a stylish exercise in excess. There was hope that additional script work might elevate the story, but even experienced hands couldn't stop it from becoming another relentless, blood-soaked spectacle. At heart, the film plays like a live-action graphic novel. Rizzo's journey is a simple one: a revenge for the woman he loved, murdered by his former clan. Years of isolation have turned him into both hunter and prey, endlessly pursued by the organization that trained him. Running parallel to his story, An investigator tries to expose the truth behind a series of brutal underworld assassinations, slowly uncovering an unseen army operating in total secrecy. Visually, the film is slick and impressively choreographed, with action sequences that rival the intensity of modern revenge epics. Much of the gore is digitally enhanced, giving it a stylized, almost unreal quality that feels more illustrative than shocking. Surprisingly, Rain proves to be a convincing physical performer. Whatever training he underwent clearly paid off, as he carries the action scenes with confidence and presence. Ultimately, the film's most memorable element is its sheer volume of bloodshed. While the story itself remains thin and easily forgotten, enjoyable in the moment, it left little lasting impression. Not a broad recommendation, but for devoted martial arts fans or lovers of extreme action, it may still be worth a watch. One thing this movie makes clear: once ninjas are unleashed, they're unstoppable. If they target you, escape is almost impossible. You can't fight them, negotiate with them, or hide from them. Betraying their code is even worse. A ninja is bound for life, and leaving the clan only paints a bigger target on your back. Anyone who investigates them fares no better, since secrecy is their greatest weapon, and anyone threatening it becomes just another mark for elimination. Stealth is the foundation of the ninja way. Once their cover is blown, their greatest weapon, surprise, is gone. And how do we know all this? Simple. The movie goes out of its way to teach you, illustrating in vivid, often excessive detail the chaos unleashed when someone becomes the target of trained ninjas. The director doesn't shy away from showing the brutality of their upbringing or how that ruthless discipline translates directly into real-world combat. At the center of this shadowy organization is its leader, portrayed as an almost godlike figure. Cruel, authoritative, utterly unforgiving. He demands absolute loyalty and, in exchange, provides training, shelter, and access to paid contracts. Because one thing the movie makes clear is that these ninjas don't work for free. They're not random killers roaming the streets. They're professionals who act only when hired, and once contracted, the job gets done, unless they run into one of their own who's gone rogue. That's where things get complicated. A renegade ninja who's abandoned the clan becomes the greatest threat of all. Since it takes a ninja to understand a ninja, the only real way to defeat them is to destroy their base. But finding that hidden stronghold is nearly impossible without insider knowledge. And after seeing what these assassins are capable of, you might seriously reconsider wanting to cross their path in the first place. A few odd details stand out, for reasons never explained. Every ninja here is Asian. They're also gifted with near superhuman abilities, leaping from rooftops, bouncing across surfaces like acrobats, performing feats far beyond normal human limits. They operate in coordinated teams, strike with precision, and move with terrifying speed, with no wasted motion. In, out, and back to their lair until the next assignment. Except for the lone renegades who work solo. I went into Ninja Assassin with fairly high expectations, especially after seeing the trailers, and watched it shortly after release. While it's undeniably entertaining in a lot of ways, there's one major issue that dragged the experience down for me, which I'll get to. The story follows Rizzo, a ninja in training who defects after witnessing the execution of a fellow student who tried to escape. He eventually becomes a hired killer, but when European investigators start uncovering the secrets of the ninja clans, Rizzo is forced to intervene, particularly to protect one of the agents. The plot itself is extremely thin, but honestly, I didn't mind with a title like Ninja Assassin. I wasn't expecting narrative depth. I just wanted a modern callback to the ninja movies I loved growing up, and in that sense, the film delivers. There's plenty of swordplay, slicing, and carnage, paired with an extremely high blood and gore count. Unfortunately, most of that gore relies heavily on CGI, and not the good kind, though it does add to the over-the-top spectacle. Here's the big problem. The action scenes are shot almost entirely in darkness, and not atmospheric darkness, actual I can't tell what's happening darkness. It's hard to follow the choreography, the geography of the fights, or even who's hitting whom. Whether that was meant to mask technical shortcomings or was a genuine stylistic choice, it seriously hurt the film for me and knocked down my overall enjoyment. If you enjoy this kind of hyper-violent ninja action, you'll probably have a good time. But personally, I found a smaller, lesser-known movie simply titled Ninja, released around the same time, more satisfying overall. Despite opening with a fantastic, gripping prologue, Ninja Assassin never quite reaches that level again. Instead of building on its premise, it seems more interested in coming up with increasingly graphic ways to dismember bodies. For a film about silent killers, it's surprisingly loud, constantly bombarded with noise, music, and chaos. It almost feels like it would have worked better as a video game, something along the lines of Tenchu, but it takes itself so seriously that it accidentally becomes laughable at times. The Wachowskis' influence is unmistakable, and unfortunately not in a positive way. The film jumps erratically between dull investigative scenes, excessive flashbacks, and long, gore-filled fights. Much of it feels rushed, poorly edited, and oddly incoherent, lacking any real sense of self-awareness. That's a shame, because director James McTeigue has proven he can do better as visual style gets buried under weak CGI and sloppy cutting. Rain doesn't get much chance to show emotional range, largely because his character is written as a silent, detached killer. Naomie Harris adds some warmth and keeps things moving when she's on screen, but the standout performance, without question, is Sho Kosugi as the Chilling Clan leader Roz Yunue. Even after years away from major roles, he still commands the screen, and for me, he was easily the film's biggest highlight. There's something admirable about Ninja Assassin trying to reintroduce the brutal world of ninjutsu to an audience that grew up long after the genre's glory days. Unfortunately, whatever promise that idea carried gets largely buried beneath a barrage of stylistic excess and filmmaking choices that drain much of the mystery and tension from the experience. What could have thrived in darkness instead becomes a relentlessly frantic explosion of violence. The story itself is straightforward. Rizzo, Rain, escapes a clandestine ninja clan responsible for assassinations across the globe. When Europol agent Mika Coretti uncovers evidence linking the group to a series of murders, she becomes their next target, and Rizzo steps in to protect her, setting off an almost continuous chain of combat that leaves very little room to breathe. From a technical standpoint, there's no denying the craftsmanship behind the action. The choreography is impressively fluid, blending stunts, CGI, and editing into sequences that feel razor-sharp and precise, with pacing and cutting that evoke the intensity of high-energy thrillers. At times the execution is genuinely striking, and in terms of pure spectacle, the film delivers exactly what it promises. That said, the violence is extreme, often overwhelmingly so. Limbs, blood, and decapitations are thrown at the viewer with little restraint. Some fans may appreciate the commitment to excess, but the sheer volume of gore eventually numbs the senses.